Andre Kafuri had mentioned when he saw what Jamie Carragher and Gary Neville were talking about Pele, which is kind of like me talking about rocket science, is his quote was tremendous. He said it was a contribution to football from proud stupidity, which is basically that. It shows sometimes the insularity of the British media. And those two are pretty much what end up being very the embodiment of it to a certain extent. I don't care what people say. To be quite honest, if people think I'm generalizing, so be it. If people think I'm not okay, I don't care. But I'm talking about this because it's something that you've heard, because it's a lot of lack of ignorance from some, because they've been able to, read books about, the 1950s and with zero clue about history, start talking about what ends up being their perception of what football was during those days, that anything in Europe was good, anything outside of Europe was bad. Anything that was European was civilized, anything that was not European was just fishermen and cavemen, I guess. That's the way it is in terms of how some people look at it. And it's sad. It's sad to see that. And once again, I don't care if you're thinking that they were facetious or they were joking around. I don't give a shit, to be quite honest with you. I'm telling you exactly how it's seen from this part, because it's always looked at from a diminutive standpoint. If it's not English, if it's not European, if it's not from one or two leagues, then it's not good. So here we go. It's something that's laughable, because it shows the insularity of how England, in most of England, there's some in England that look at it very very differently, and it's always respected, and it's always looked upon, it's always appreciated. But when you start looking at what Carragher, to me, a half-ass, if that, defender, Gary Neville, player. Not that I was anything great, but when you have these types of, it was interesting to hear Roberto Baggio saying, "Hey, players that couldn't even juggle the ball 3 times now end up criticizing players that are amongst the best in the world," or something along those lines. They try and make themselves like they were better than they actually were, and you hear the ignorance coming out and how it's been promulgated for years about Pele playing against fishermen. It says something about football in Europe during that time. If Pele and Brazil were able to go and beat Real Madrid and beat AC Milan and beat Benfica and beat Manchester United and beat Barcelona and so on and so forth in their European tours that would last 30, 40 games. It was basically sometimes a season that they would go and for all intents and purposes play European teams, like sometimes 20, 30, 40 games on their tours. And you start seeing those types of comments being mentioned by guys like Carragher, who outside of England, no one knows him. Actually, for being a pundit, yes, but his career, okay, he played for Liverpool, but he wasn't that great a player. Same thing for Neville, because he was born in England. If Carragher and Neville weren't born in England, I don't think they would have been able to play football anywhere else in the world. Maybe the U.S., but that's another story. But I don't think they would have been able to play football, and especially Brazil. let's be completely real. But it's not about, I guess, bashing. I think I shouldn't go to that level either, and I shouldn't have. But it just shows you how little people know about the game. It just shows you how little people investigate it and find out about how things were during those days. And if it didn't happen in a certain country, then it had zero value. If it didn't occur in a certain league in a certain time, then it was no good. And if it wasn't with a certain team, it was no good. And Pelé didn't play in Europe, but there were reasons why he didn't play in Europe. Then he wasn't that good a player when they don't realize and understand the reasons why he didn't go and play in Europe. It just shows, again, the ignorance that is shown by some in some aspects of media. Now, there's some super intelligent guys. I mean, you start seeing what people that end up really analyzing. I mean, I got to give credit to Marcelo Corregi. I have the utmost respect for you guys as pundits, but these laughs while talking about the most accomplished player of all times is disrespectful. Football goes beyond your borders. If you don't agree, let's just remember Pelé's goals goals in Europe. Kind regards. Seems like English media forget how Pelé only beat him once, not beat him twice, beat him 3 times, and was probably the most dominating player of his time. And that's exactly what they kind of forgot. And if that was against fishermen, and he's doing that against, what does that say about English football? I mean, if you want to get facetious. But that, again, shows you exactly where things are, because it has those types of tinges, and it ends up being ugly. And when people start to answer back in an ugly manner, then they start saying, hey, but why are you like that? Why are you going to that level? Because at times people don't understand certain things until you end up getting smacked back just as hard or even harder. Is it something that someone wants to do? No. But at times you have to pretty much lay down the education and start saying, hey, this is how things really were. People forget that Brazil was one of the most competitive leagues in the world back in that era. Brazil was the best national team. Brazil was the measuring stick for national teams in the world at that time, alongside Hungary, alongside Germany. Even Sweden, who ended up playing the final back in 1958. But Brazil was the standard bearer. Brazil was the greatest show on earth kind of team. That ended up being the key. That ended up being what people would go and see. They wanted to go see Brazil play. They wanted to see Santos play. A good core of that Brazilian national team played for Santos. So when people start saying that about Pelé, it's borderline insulting. And it's borderline insulting because of the ignorance that is put on display by people in media, which is something I work in. And at times I feel kind of in a situation where I'm betraying my own profession when I go out and criticize someone that says something like that. But it has to be said, because then people go out and criticize you because, well, media this, media that. But hey, wait a second, that's not me. No, you have to go and truly come out and say, look, you're doing a disservice. And I think many in the English media have done a huge disservice to the people. And mind you, I kind of understand, because when Premier League matches are being shown, nothing else is shown in England. That's it. It's very limited, the amount of games that people see in England. The leagues that are being shown is very limited. And that ends up being a big problem. That, of course, has to change, but it's present because of archaic regulations that have been in place for over 40 years. And, of course, now in 2022, the consumption of the sport is quite different compared to 1982. So, what to do? It makes one sad. It makes one disappointed as to what people do in this profession when they speak with such an ignorant light.